Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we are back to discuss where we are at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club Central in the latest episode of the soap drama that continues and never ever leaves you wanting more. If you're with us for the very, very first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on X, we're on Instagram, and we're on Blue Sky too. I'm welcoming back a regular, a returner, and a debutant to Last Word on Spurs. We're spicing it up at Last Word on Spurs HQ. What are we doing? Back alongside me, he's been alongside me for the last 3-4 weeks. I'm delighted to have George Achillea back alongside me. G, tough times at the moment, to be fair. How are you? Love to be back alongside me.
Yeah, it was not an easy week last week at all. But you know what? We love these sessions. We love talking about Spurs, hopefully getting things off our chest. So yeah, it's going to be a lot to delve into today. But again, just happy to be back on the show and let's get into it.
Bless you. Thank you so much. Also back on the show, been a while, the brilliant Bob Dwyer. Bless us with his presence over in the Irish seas. Bob, love to see you back on Last Word on Spurs. We'll get you to unmute. How are you?
Apart from great to be back on, Ricky. Yeah, it's normally I'm the patient for these therapy sessions on the Monday morning after a bad result. So now I'm sitting here giving the therapy. So yeah, looking forward to getting it over the next hour and a bit with yourself and the guys. So yeah, let's chat Tottenham.
Bless you, Bob. And also making up our panel. Look, I don't think it needs any introduction in the Tottenham YouTube sphere, if that's what it's called. A man that you see regularly on a lot of different channels out there. A man that's very fond in the community for the work he's done in terms of trying to, I think it's fair to say, try and shift the narrative with regards to the ownership and where we are right now. We'll be coming on to that definitely during the show. Delighted to give a debut to the wonderful Brian Dagul. Brian, we've been speaking off air over the course of these last few weeks, few months. How are you? Love to be on here to make your debut.
First of all, thank you for having me on, Ricky. It's great to be on the show. And yeah, just another day in paradise at the world of being a Tottenham Hotspur fan, and looking forward to discussing everything that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we just said there about an hour and a bit. I mean, about an hour would probably cover the start of it, right? It's what can you say we are with Spurs right now? I think for many out there, just a deeply depressing place. Well, I know for many out there, they're just numb to what's going on at the football club. I know for so many, this is people's lives. This is what they look forward to. It's the first thing they wake up in the morning. It's the last thing they go to bed thinking about at night. And I think for many out there, as much as me at the moment, you just kind of wake up and your head's just in an absolute frazzle and an absolute mess as to where we are with Tottenham right now. So it's a pleasure to have you, Brian, on for the first time.
Thank you.
And look, we'll be discussing everything on this show with regards to where we are under Ange Postecoglou, of course, where we are with regards to that upcoming protest this weekend. How much of a difference can it make as to where Spurs are right now? We'll be talking about some of the returning players, whether that's going to have a massive difference in terms of Spurs' season. And also, there's been potential talk about maybe a contract renewal for Christian Romero. Where are we with that? Bearing in mind, I think everyone has seen Romero for the last fortnight, given that the likes of him, Van der Ven, were reportedly back in training. Where are they? What is going on? We'll be discussing that and more in this Last Word on Spurs. Obviously, the last time we was on, I've got to say, just for those out there that wondered what has happened to our show we did against Aston Villa, quite conveniently, I let my son use his iPad. This is about 8 o'clock this morning, and I went to go and revisit what happened to the 25,000 views of the game we had at the weekend, and suddenly it deleted itself. So I think my son had a pleasure trying to find Bebefin and Cocomelon. So we have now re-uploaded for those that still want to go back and listen and view the Barco after Villa. I'm not sure you want to go back there, but it is still there for you if you guys need to go back to it. Look, we're going to update you as to where we are firstly with regards to Ange Postecoglou's future. I think it's important that we bring this into play. Firstly, we understand as things remain at the moment, Daniel Levy and the club's board remain sympathetic to the challenges Ange Postecoglou has faced and have held off into rushing a decision over his future. They understand injuries have played a key part as to why Spurs find themselves where they are right now in terms of the general position in the league and the fact they've gone out of 2 cups in the space of the last week. Ange Postecoglou has given his Tottenham Hotspur players the first 2 days off of the week in order to recharge. That, of course, meaning Monday and Tuesday. And the rest now are being given their preparations from the Man United game ahead of Sunday, which does feel like a huge, huge game for the football club. important that I do emphasise. I know many, when they listened and watched our previous show, maybe felt injuries wasn't given enough of an emphasis and a focus. We can, of course, for those that are watching the show, give you a display there of what Spurs are up against right now in terms of the injury list. They've got up to 11 senior players out for a range of different injuries, from knees, injury to calf, to thigh, to ankle, to hamstring. One that I know for many fans out there may suggest that's been brought on by Ange Postecoglou himself. And also to bring out to you as well, some of the stats that have come out over the course of the last 24, 48 hours, that Spurs players have missed a combined total of 213 games this season through injury, 44 more than anyone competing in Europe. And since November the 22nd, 3 Spurs players in particular, them being Pedro Porro, Archie Gray, as well as Dejan Kulusevski, have played more minutes, understood to be over 1,700 in all competitions. No other outfield player at that time has reached such a total, and Pedro Porro has played more minutes than any outfield player in Spain or Italy. Lucas Bergvall's played more than 1,000 minutes since mid-November. So just to obviously give you the details and stats there, that, look, it's fair to say that there's a lot of different reasons to why Spurs are struggling right now, but the spotlight being one on ENIC, on Levy, the culture of the football club, and of course on head coach Ange Postecoglou. Brian, I'm going to steer the show for you to open us here, because let's be honest about it, it's been a horrendous last 5, 6, 7 days being a Spurs fan. It's seen us crash out of 2 cup competitions, which has really, again, shone the spotlight on Ange Postecoglou's future. Many out there felt that should he have crashed out of these both competitions, he shouldn't remain the Tottenham manager. Although I will again suggest there are many that are really sympathetic to the injury crisis we're facing right now. Simple question to open. Where are we in your mind on Ange Postecoglou, and should he still be the Tottenham head coach?
Me personally now, I don't think he should be Tottenham Hotspur head coach. I said with this manager, I wanted to see a project through. I really wanted it to work, but my turning point was the North London derby. You looked at that game, and the players shouldn't need a pep talk, shouldn't need G'ing up for this game. It should be maximum effort, maximum output, and there's nothing. Then I started looking. I was just about to do my bit on We Are Tottenham, and then I got a message saying, you do realise we've now lost more games than Ipswich. And that stat, for some reason, really hit me, seeing that Ipswich hadn't even had a victory until they beat us in November. So you start thinking about the defeats that they must have incurred or not got, and then everything has just kind of snowballed for me. These injuries, yes, they have affected us, and there's no way to get away from it, but we had the chance to rotate. Spence came in because of all these injuries, not because he'd shown anything in training. Gray in defence. We had options in midfield. We just didn't use them. And it looks like the players that have done well, i.e. your Grays, your Bergvalls, your Spence, I don't believe would have had the opportunity had the injuries not occurred. Then all these stats that are coming up, I can't believe it's been 3 months without a home win in the Premier League. There's so many other stats that people keep regurgitating. But also, Ricky, I have to say, it's something that you said as well that really, really struck me. I was on after the Leicester game when you said that we left we left White Hart Lane, and you left, we were challenging for titles and in Champions League regularly.
Yeah.
And you look where we are now. And I really wanted to see Ange see the job through. I don't like how he's been in the media recently as well. He gets asked these questions for a reason. He's very flippant. And I just wish he had experimented with more things before it was too late and before he had to see what he could do. A back 3 against Everton, trying it for 45 minutes. Everton was the one team he probably could have got away with not playing a back 3, and it wasn't tried again. There's just things I think he could have done to help himself that he didn't take the opportunity until it was right, the only option he had. And I just can't see a way out for him now. I just can't see these players all coming back, all being fit, all being pumped up, all being on tip-top form. I just can't see it. And the Cups, for me, was a huge thing why he was staying. because they wanted to see him get the cups through. And obviously we've gone out of 2 of them. So for me personally now, I think it time's up for him. But that's just my opinion.
We'll come on to what that means for you, Brian, in terms of in time being up in your mind and what Spurs maybe should or shouldn't do at this time. There's a lot of shouldn'ts. I mean, there's a lot that they should do as well. I mean, G, look, I think you've been very sympathetic when you've been on here, definitely in the last few months with regards to, like I say, the plight Ange has found with regards to those injuries. And I think whatever we say or we feel, I mean, you can't get away from the fact that, for many, it might frustrate me by me saying this, that, look, it is a horrendous injury list that Spurs are facing right now. And it's the second time, like I say, in the space of the 2 seasons that we've had such a horrendous injury list. You get one, you lose another 2. Where are you in your mind, G, right now? I mean, I think for many out there, it was the manner of those 2 cup exits that are really, really hard to take. If you was in both of those games and you've lost them by the odd goal, it's different. And look, to be fair, we lost the game to Villa by the odd goal, but I think many look at that opening 30, 40 minutes, the lack of structure, the way in that Liverpool game we seem to set up in a way in which we allow Liverpool to have a lot of the ball. I will just say again for balance here, Ange Postecoglou was insistent. He did not ask the players to set up that way, which again maybe pays some understanding as to whether these players are listening right now. I mean, George, in your mind, where are you with regards to Postecoglou's future?
Listen, I said from the very, very beginning, I want to give this guy 2 seasons at least to see where we end up. And I think I'm sticking by that as well. And I think I still have a lot of questions over some of the decisions, like it's been touched on about not playing certain players early at the start of the season, or maybe not doing some of the right substitutions. But I really do think it's disingenuous when people say that he hasn't changed his tactics, or not changed completely, but he hasn't evolved some of it at the start of the season. Because whilst, yes, some of the results weren't great right at the beginning, like your Leicester and Newcastle, I think people forget that we all came out of those games saying we battered these teams, we should have got more out of them. And it was probably about 10 games in, we had the best away record in the league in terms of goals conceded. So we conceded the least. We had the second highest goals scored out of anyone. And we're losing games by 1 goal margin. I think it's 12 games this season. We've lost games by a 1 goal margin. And we've not won by a 1 goal margin all season, which goes to show that we either batter teams or we are just narrowly losing. And there were tweaks at the start of the season. But I totally understand people's frustrations with him. But I just think it's really telling that these players are still backing him publicly, which hasn't happened with previous managers where we have been better, like way better than the situation we're in.
Do you feel they're playing for him, though, G? You said they're backing him.
Yeah, I think they are.
They're playing him. They're
I think they are. We're playing the same 11 practically, maybe changing 2 players in midfield 3 times a week for the last 2.5 months. I think, and it's not that they're not trying to do his ideals. I think that first goal at Villa on Sunday showed that it's the positioning of the players was exactly how Ange sets them up. It was Moore and Porro pressing the right-hand side, Bentancur covering their winger, which was the right thing for him to do at the time. Unfortunately, the players just look knackered. The fact that they just got walked through like that, I don't think that was a lack of them not implementing his style of football. I think they physically just couldn't do it.
Can I ask you one question, G?
Yeah.
On the tiredness, what I'm really intrigued over before I've been bobbing as well, is that when you look at the first goal Spurs conceded against Villa, we're in the opening minute or so there, is that a structural thing for you? Because they can't be tired in the first minute against Villa, right? To concede, literally, we're looking at 1 minute 37. That can't be a tiredness thing, because you'd like to think what the manager said to them before they go out there, before the Villa game, is, guys, look, got to keep it tight early on, find our way into the game. And listen, you can't get away from it. We are playing, as he's made it very, very clear in that passionate press conference after the Villa game, we are playing pretty much the same 11, 12, 13 players, game after game, every 3 or 4 days. Yes, that's going to take an effect. But I think where many do find that frustration, it's the manner of some of the performances. And what I really find hard for me is when you're seeing players bottle out of challenges. There's certain players that you're just simply not seeing at the level that they are right now. And again, we will make that point, as you said there, George. It is hard to get to a sustained level when you are not having adequate rest time. And we know the players really, they can't really do training because they're having on a recovery period continually. But I need to come back to you on that point, George. That first goal against Villa, that can't be tiredness, can it? The way we can see in the first minute and a half and they cut through us wide open.
Not necessarily, but, well, you say it can't be. The exact same team pretty much, like I said, the midfield played 2 days prior in Liverpool and then had to travel to to Birmingham as well. So
the point is, we're a minute and 37 in. You see, I'm coming from. We're a minute and
no,
37
100%. I do see where you're coming from as well. And I think the problem is you have to go play by play for that to show that some things just weren't executed well. And I had looked at the whole game back, same with the Liverpool ones, just to see what kind of went wrong. And there's so many little intricate things that have, like, you got more pressing from one side wrong, Porro leaving massive gaps in the middle. All these things sort of lead to certain players being out of positions. And I saw that in Liverpool one as well. Sarr was being caught on the wrong side of Gravenberch, which meant that he was already behind him when trying to wing the ball back. But because of that, that means Spence comes up sooner to try and cover him. And then that leaves Salah in behind. And it's like one mistake from a player will lead to a chain of events that could lead to a shot on goal or something that happening. So, but again, I think there's such bigger things at play where we're not going to get relegated this season. We're just not. We've got the capacity, and we're better than the teams below us to be able to see out the season. We've obviously still got the Europa League, but obviously that's a big if right now as to how well we're doing that. And I just don't see how getting rid of Ange right now changes anything for the club. It will be Ryan Mason till the end of the season. It will be the same players out injured, and I don't see a single improvement in any game coming forward. So I personally would rather them stick with Ange till the end of the season and then reassess there. If you have other managers you want to target, fine. I can totally understand why people would want him out. I just don't think getting rid of him right now in this very moment makes a difference in what results we might get or where we end up in the season. Personally. But it kind of goes back to the fact that the squad was left short in the summer, that we all knew that he needed cover for left back and left centre back, and that wasn't given to him. So of course, then we got players then playing out of position, or if one gets injured, it kind of falls this, that, and the other. So I think it just goes so much deeper than it just being Ange's fault. And like I said at the beginning, I still have questions over him as well. I do still have questions over him, but I just don't see the benefit of sacking him at this very moment. I'd be far more inclined to see how the season pans out, especially when it comes to Europa League, and then reassess and see what options you have then, because there just will not be a better option to come in mid-season right now.
Bob, let's bring you in. You've had to listen there to George and Brian give their thoughts over his last 10 minutes or so. Love to see you on the show. I know, like I say, for you, we're going to come on to some of those other names that have been mentioned in these, like I say, next few minutes of the show. But where are you, Bob? Because I feel like, I've known you for quite a number of years. You're a fairly moderate fan. You're not one to normally get too crazy, although this club can send you crazy. Where are we in your mind, Bob? Because there's obviously a lot of question marks, as Jules says, around the manager right now. There's obviously still at camp where many feel that once he gets the players back, we're going to see an uplift. I know that many feel, look, we saw the same suggestions last season, second half of the season, we didn't really see an uplift. There's many that are sympathetic to the injury crisis right now. Where are you in your mind, Bob?
Yeah, I think I'm somewhere in between Brian and George in where I stand on the spectrum of Ange in or out. Like I know I've said to you recently, Ricky, I've never flip-flopped so much on something. Like after a game, emotionally, you think this is done. Then you see him in his next press conference and he cracks a witty line and you're thinking, do you know what, maybe he is okay. I've always said I'd love to go for a drink with Ange, and whether he stays with us or not, I'll stand over that. He'll be delighted to hear that. But look, at the end of the day, and I think this touches upon slightly on what George was saying, I think, look, Ange Ball, it's been a while since we've seen it, and maybe it was a myth from the start, but it is a house of cards. And I think if there's one piece missing, like George said, one player gets dragged, another player gets dragged, and then we're just so open. And I think if you tie that in with the fatigue of the players at the moment, there's bad decisions being made. Players are stepping out of position, they're chasing the game, and we're wide open. So I think there is that, and we can blame Ange, we can blame the injuries, we can blame a certain chairman, when in reality it's a mixture of everything that's wrong with our club at the moment. And it's not a matter of Ange in, Ange out, Levy in, Levy out. I think Crackers coined this a few years back. Let's sort it out. And I think that's what we need to do. So, and I know I'm flip-flopping here a few times already.
Well, Bob, let me ask you a question on this point you're making here. I know for you, you're suggesting at the moment that you're kind of swinging one way to another kind of week upon week right now. Do you think somebody else gets more out of the current available group of players that Ange Postecoglou has got right now? That's the key question to ask. You do.
In more than one word, I do. In more than one word, as the four talkers here, I think I'm not sure if that manager is available right now. Can I stomach another interim manager with Ryan Mason or Matt Wells? I don't think I can. But and this comes back to, I just don't understand football at the moment, why people can't go in and take a manager mid-season. Where has this come from that we can't go to Bournemouth and go and take Areola? I don't care that they're having their best season ever. Like, they're seventh in the league. It's Bournemouth versus one of the biggest clubs in the world, and I'm standing over that. We should be able to go to Bournemouth, pay what we need to pay, offer him more money, and he'd go. And I stand over that. And
I think the difference is we should be able to, but they won't, because they don't want to. They want to pay slots release clause. They didn't want to.
No.
There's so many other factors that we just historically know that we won't be able to take him away mid-season.
I think on that tone there, just let you come in there, Bob. I mean, the thing is, we have the X account that doesn't tweet anything or post anything for 24 hours. And in between that, we get the Kendrick Lamar announcement and Beyonce's got 2 extra nights. It just kind of sums up really what the priority and focus is right now. You know, for some out there during the transfer window, we saw Rolling Stones get done. We saw Eubank and Ben get done. We had more commercial deals being done than there was signings for the football club at a time when a manager has cried out for help before the window had opened, during the window, up until the final few days where we're playing with fire. I just think that even on the players' side, Bob, so that you come back in here, I honestly think that had we signed players earlier, and I think, you know, the Tell one was always going to be a late one. Obviously, we brought Kinski in the first out of the month. The Danso one, I don't see why that couldn't have been done earlier. I just think with better players coming in, I think Tottenham would have got a result at Everton. I think they would have got a better result at Leicester. And look, I'm not saying that the difference between 4 or 5 points changes our season, that we're suddenly fighting for Europe. But like many managers out there before Ange Postecoglou, and it will be again afterwards, we've failed this manager like we failed all the previous managers by not backing them. You know, I've not in my lifetime seen a successful transfer window under ENIC. And here we are 24, 25 years later, and I'm still waiting for one. I just wonder, Bob, in your mind right now, you're saying that we won't go and get a new we won't go and pay the money for a new manager. That's because of the culture, right, that we've shown in the past. There's that ambition there on the football club side to go and do what's in the best interests of Tottenham. Is that where you're coming from on that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I completely agree on that. And I think that culture, look, we've all worked for companies. I'm working 20 years, 20 years old in companies. And I think it does come from the top. And if you know the CEO, the GM is taking their mind, you know, that you can get away with subpar performance, or, you know, putting your feet up when you shouldn't, it's only human nature to do so. And that's probably even slipping through to the players, and probably has over the last 10 years. So I completely agree with you that the culture isn't there. And Levy has completely taken his eye off the ball, even more so since 2019, since the stadium has been built, and now he sees all these extra commercial activities on top of the football club. So he wasn't the perfect chairman to start before, and I think since then he's taken his eye off the ball even more. But by me saying that about, you know, why can't we go in and get the managers that we want? Like, and I know it's Daniel Levy, but yeah, we need to do that. And like you asked me the question, do I think somebody would do a better job with the current group of players? Yes. Do I think the manager's out there? Yes. What's stopping that from happening? The board and Levy and ENIC and so on. So if it's the case, Ange Postecoglou or Ryan Mason and Matt Wells, stick with Ange, ride it out the end of the season, have a bit of fun with it, go on the roller coaster, see what happens. If it's the case, we have Ryan Mason, a certain person we'll be talking about later, I think, in the show, who's from Argentina, who we all probably have a soft spot for. Bring him back. You know, Thomas Frank, Marco Silva, all these. But let's take it seriously for once. And Ricky, at the start of the season, exact same as what George was saying. We knew we were short. I said it to you. I gave you names. I think I was on I think Jared Branthwaite from Everton. I think I said that to you in a voice note, and you said there's no way we're going in for somebody like that. He covers left centre half, and Van could then cover left full. You know, we could play around it.
Yeah,
like these are the players we should be going in with. But then we go in last day before the window, and we go in for Mark Gahey, and we tried FC. Like, we're all sick of it. Like,
yeah, we are.
We're all bought into this more than anyone. Like, we all, this dictates our week. Like, I would listen to Last Word on Spurs, A View from the Lane on a Monday. I won't listen to one other football podcast. I'm not just saying that diplomacy, Ricky. I will, because I can't deal with this. Other fans talk about Spurs and give them shit. I can't. It ruins our week. I don't think it ruins Daniel Levy's week.
No, that's a very key thing here. I mean, look, Hotspur says we've only won against Everton, Southampton and West Ham. How are we better? Look, I think, as we know, there's a massive split right now as to where we are. And Brian, what I think has caused a lot of that split, of course, is the one constant at this club, Daniel Levy, for the last 24, 25 years. I don't think there's many more people out there than you that I need to suggest to the fact of just how much of the failure of the responsibility lies as to where we are right now, because of, once again, the failure to back a manager, whatever we may think about that manager. The reality is that we have been here so many times before, Brian, that, as you know more than anybody, so many fans are just tired. They're tired of going through the same cycle, the same conversations, whether it's the transfer window, whether it's about backing someone, whether it's about giving somebody a bit more money, whether it's about the same typical conversations that come up. I mean, in your mind, Brian, you said it there, feel free to bring Daniel Levy into conversation now. But, you said for you that Ange Postecoglou, you feel, has run out of road.
Yep.
If you were that person that was to make that decision right now, who would you be bringing in if there was that option to bring somebody in right now that could see us through to the end of the season, in your mind?
Well, to say the truth, Ricky, if we were to do it now, the only thing for me is the dreaded Ryan Mason and Wells, because any manager we do want to try and get is not going to come at this time of the season. Any manager we do want to try and get is going to their club's going to ask a huge whopping compensation fee or package to get him. I just can't. The only ones we could possibly get in are, like Rob's just said in the comments, Terzic, Southgate, and they don't tick the boxes for me, especially the former England manager. I think I would be prepared to give it to Mason till the end of the season. And the reason I say that as well, as silly as it sounds crazy, me actually saying it. I can't believe I'm actually saying these words. But I just think when we all see what's going on the pitch, we don't see what's going on in training. We don't know what the mood in camp is like. We don't know what the mental state of the players are and how they're actually feeling. We've obviously seen the players come out and speak out about the club. And we're going to speak about Romero, obviously, later. Kulu did. Sonny had. Just inside training grounds, a change of attitude, a shift of training may have an improvement. I'm willing to roll the dice and then try and get someone in the summer. Everyone mentioned names, and Bob mentioned one who I actually wanted before Postecoglou, and I think the guy is brilliant. It's Thomas Frank. I think Thomas Frank is underrated for the job he's doing at Brentford. I think he changes things within games. He sees things. He's tactically aware. Will change to certain games, not always say, right, we do it this way, this way, this way. Every time I watch a Sky Sports special on him, whether it be a recent one where they did a day with him, or he looks like a guy that you want to run through a brick wall through. The Brentford fans love him. The Brentford players love him. I would love to see a Thomas Frank, because I think the days have gone where we could try and get one of these big name managers because of a certain person upstairs. They won't want to come. They know they're not going to get the money like Conte and Jose. So we got to stop aiming that high. They're not going to get the time. I would put everything in to try and get Thomas Frank in the summer and give it to Mason until the end of the season.
It's interesting, that conversation over the manager. I mean, look, the thing at the moment is I've just felt this over the course of the last few weeks. So I said after the Everton game, surely you can't survive it because of the manner when we were 3-0 down. But then I've come to this kind of point where I'm thinking he's going to probably be here to the end of the season. That might upset people by me saying that. But I think the situation now is that I think when you look at the fact of the injury list that we've got right now, and again, this is going to upset a few by me suggesting this or saying this, that I think the way the club probably look at it right now is that if you're not going to sack him after the 2 cup games, which you've just had, then they probably are going to wait and see if there's any kind of uplift with regards to when he gets those players back. Look, whether it's rightly or wrongly, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, it's whether then you weigh up, if it wasn't going to be that suggestion, whether they would go and bring in somebody that can actually have an impact and try and win the Europa League. And many, I'm not going to like this suggestion that I'm going to say out there. Not that I would personally want him. Do the club look at somebody that, as Brian's referred to, might be out of work? Brian's not put his name out there, just to be very, very clear. Out of work, no money. Again, would you dare? And the football is utterly horrendous. It is. Rafa Benitez has won the Europa League twice. I mean, would Tottenham dare look at someone like Rafa Benitez that has won it twice to the end of the season, bring him in? I can see George just seem to be shaking your head there. You can't see that happening. I just think at the moment where Spurs are right now, the silence is deafening, isn't it? I mean, I think for many out there, they probably in the back of their mind were thinking he'd have to go after the manner of those 2 cup games. But the reality is that I think now the club are in a situation where Ange has bemoaned the injury crisis. How do you then not let him get back the injuries to see if it makes a difference? I mean, look, I honestly think, as I've said now on a number of, shows, I think now I'd just let it ride to the end of the season. I don't think if we bring Matty Wells and Ryan Mason into play, that they're going to win Tottenham the Europa League. I don't see there going to be any uplift whatsoever on the basis that it's actually the same voices that you're hearing on a day-to-day basis around Ange. And look, that's nothing against Ryan Mason or Matty Wells. I'm sure, look, they love the football club. They care for the football club. I just don't really see a massive impact in terms of what those guys are going to say to the players, even if Ange departs. So I think unless you're going to change everything in terms of bringing an interim in and an assistant, I don't see much changing. I mean, I know, George, for you, you'd keep with the manager, but if there was to be a change, I mean, where do you see there being an uplift for a change? Could you see Mason and Wells getting anything more out of the players than Ange's right now? Or do you now look at the kind of field of an interim? Because back to Bob's point as well, I don't think the club in their state of the mind, I say their state, well, I mean, their state of mind rather than anything else, they're not going to spend money on Iriolas to get him out of Bournemouth. They're not going to spend money on Thomas Frank and they're not going to spend money on Marco Silva. So the other option is, do you give it to somebody else that's out of work right now? And just to be very, very clear, I'm not advocating Rafa Benitez. I think that would be a difficult watch, and the way he fell out at Everton in the final few games there, that wasn't pretty. But he has won the Europa League twice. Do you bring a specialist in to win a Europa League where, with all due respect, there's not a huge amount of great teams left in there, and you are looking at really getting the tactics spot on for we now got 6 games left of it, potentially 8 games left of it, George?
Yeah, do you know what, weirdly enough, it kind of reminds me of like the Mourinho, like the late Mourinho days, where there were so many moments prior where you think they should have sacked him, whether that's like the Europa League exit, certain results in the league. But then they just, for me personally, they just got the timing completely wrong and sacked him 7 days or 6 days before a League Cup final, which for me made no sense. And I think they've kind of been burnt by that because they've got a lot of backlash for that, and they're trying to find almost like the right time to do it. I think it's a bit of a game of chess between Ange and the board at the moment, because if they sack him now, he can easily just say they didn't give a chance in Europe. You could argue it's different to the domestic leagues because European teams might not necessarily suss us out as much as Premier League teams do. He's going on about the injuries non-stop because, again, that's basically his advantage of saying, look, what the club didn't give me sufficient players to carry this season through to compete across all full competition, which is what they want me to do. So I think the board just have no idea when the right time to do it is. And I think they've gone past the point of no return now. There's a lot of managers that they could have maybe have gone in for potentially if they really wanted to do it, which they can't do now, like Tuchel going to England, Nagelsmann signing a new deal with Germany. They've missed the boat on everyone. I think at this point they kind of have to stick with him until the end of the season, or at least until we exit the Europa League. If that were to happen, then it's kind of like, well, we've got nothing else left. You might as well sack him, sort of thing. So I don't see how they do sack him until we either exit the cup or it gets to the summer. In terms of someone like Mason, I mean, this would be the 3rd manager in a row now that he would have taken over from.
It'd be the first time we go back to Mason. I don't think we just go back to Mason. I think you'd probably go to Wells, because Wells is now above Mason.
I would have thought that. I would have thought that as well. And also, well, they're both coaches under Ange anyway in this style of football. So realistically, what actually changes, bar maybe what they do on the touchline, which some people obviously value very highly. So, I genuinely don't really see. And in terms of the short-term managers, again, where I think that's a problem for the board, like say it was to be a Benitez, just as an example, that just then reaffirms that they've got no clue what they're doing, because
But
We
I
went
think
for
I think
window.
we've already gathered that, George. Haven't we?
I know,
That's
but
what they're doing.
it's about the perception they want to give as well, right? And we went for the win now managers after Pochettino.
Yeah.
Didn't work. They've promised this amazing project under Ange and spent months and months of research to make it work and change the whole backroom staff to make this project thing work. To then all of a sudden, you're technically now bringing in a out of work win now manager again to see out the season. But it makes them look even more incompetent than it has been so far. So
I think for a lot of people out there, I think the Europa League, being a trophy coming over to you, Bob. I mean, this is the one thing that I think a lot of people are pinning their hopes on, and I think this again is where you get to a point is once those players come back, do we feel Ange Postecoglou can get this group together to win the Europa League? And the reality is, I mean, it sounds crazy suggesting we can even win the Europa League at the moment. I look at the last week of what Tottenham have had and what they've done to us. The crazy thing is, though, I mean, if he was to win the Europa League, you couldn't sack him. You'd have to give him, generally more time. But I mean, look, I have to ask you about one name, Bob, that has been kind of once again springing up in the media. I know a man that you've got a lot of love for. And again, this again does split a lot of people's views right now on what their thoughts are of him before and after that period at Chelsea. And that is Maurizio Pochettino, where, of course, over the last week or so, Maurizio was spotted in a North London pub, not too far from the training ground, signing a Tottenham flag. I think, look, we have to make this point on Maurizio, just to be very, very clear, that he is currently, tied up in a contract with the US, which makes it virtually impossible for him to leave before the 2026 World Cup. And we understand if there's any compensation fee in his contract, there would have to be a high fee Daniel Levy would even have to consider paying to get him out of that contract. I know what's been doing the rounds over the last 24 hours is that they've seen this image coming along on Cruise Hill Golf Club that suggests that Scott Munn, Johan Langer are meeting with meeting with Maurizio Pochettino and Jesus Perez for a round of golf. He was spotted last week, obviously, Maurizio in North London. I know that he absolutely loves Tottenham and I think he would love to return. I have really serious question marks as to whether he'd want to return under this ownership, the same ownership that you could argue at the first point of a crisis didn't give him the backing. And the irony is, I know for many out there, they feel that the amount of backing Ange has got, where was that backing from Maurizio Pochettino at a time of when he had a difficult run? I mean, Bob, in your mind, Pochettino, is that a viable option maybe next season, or do you not allow your mind to go there and think that, Bob?
I would sell my mum to get Pochettino back at Spurs. I love the man. It's the absolute dream for me for him to come back. I'm that person who'll see his odds shorten ever so slightly on Paddy Power and start to think he's coming back. I think he could come back. I think I think he has unfinished business at Spurs, and I think he would love to come back and finish what he started. He still loves the club, and people do say, "Oh, why would he come back under Levy?" The reason I think he comes back, and excuse my romanticism on this, is he genuinely loves the club, and I think he would. I think he'd come back. Should we? I
think he loves the fans. Whether he loves the people he'd be working for is a different question. I think that's probably why. I mean, Brian, coming over to you, the reason why for me I just couldn't see it working under this current ownership, and I will come back to Bob on it, is that you have to remember, if they go back to Pochettino, it's really a damning indictment of the failure for the last 5, 6, 7 years. You're turning back to the same person that you fired to try and get the football club back on its feet. And look, I think, again, just to be very, very clear, and I can tell you, but judging by the comments here as well, that there are still many that don't forgive Maurizio Pochettino for joining Chelsea. But the reason why, for many, this is a topic and a talking point is because this man's name was sung by some of the away fans at Aston Villa. I mean, Brian, your mind, do you see Pochettino coming back to Tottenham a viable option? Because again, we have to make that. You don't see it happening, no? You don't see it happening.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ricky. The only reason I don't see it there is first of all, Daniel Levy would need to apologise. Then he'd have to pay, as you said, a huge compensation to America. And what a lot of managers never get the chance to do is be a manager of a national team in a World Cup, let alone a host nation in a World Cup. So I just can't see it happening before that World Cup. I just can't see it. I was disappointed he went to Chelsea, but even when we were singing, or the fans were singing his name when I was in the ground after Conte got sacked, I don't want Pochettino anywhere near this football club under Daniel Levy. If we were to get new owners tomorrow and they said, right, this is the first thing we do, Poch is going to come in and have our backing, I would be more than happy. I would be delighted. But I think at the moment, under this ownership, it's just not going to happen. I understand the romance behind it. I understand the desire. We all know it's like you said, his love for this football club and the fans is there for all to see, and we all know it. But I just can't see it happening under Levy, and definitely before the World Cup. So I think it's a nice pipe dream, but I just cannot see it happening, and I don't think it will.
It's interesting. I mean, G, coming over to you, look, we can't get away from it. He didn't win anything at Tottenham. He got as close than anybody has done in the recent years, and you would argue that he embodies the most successful period at Spurs during ENIC's tenure without winning anything. But there is still, as you know, Bob and Brian have touched upon there's still a romanticism for a lot of fans that they would love to see Maurizio come back to Tottenham because he just got us. And to me, look, for me, I never hated him. I never used that word, a snake, against him when he joined Chelsea, because the reality is he wanted that Tottenham job that summer and he never got the call. Yeah. So then how can you be angry at a man that wants to go back into work? And I don't care what anyone says. I think joining Chelsea to joining Arsenal for me is a little bit different. You know, we despise Arsenal as being Tottenham fans. Chelsea, they make it a rivalry where, with all due respect, I mean, is it a rivalry? Look, we still dislike Chelsea, but we dislike them for different reasons, I think, the way they've become as a football club. I mean, in your mind, George, I know there's been a lot of PR stunt around the 24 hours. I can't see that being true about, you know, Cruise Hill Golf Club. I mean, we both lived in there, so we can go in the bushes and have a look. But I don't see that being really true. But in your mind, I mean, do you see a Tottenham with a Pochettino return at some point? And if you do, where would that be if that was to be in your mind?
No, I don't see it happening. I think, one, they don't want to admit they're wrong about sacking him in the first place, which is exactly why they didn't give him the call back a year and a half ago.
Yep.
Two, look, the nostalgia is a big thing, man. Everyone wants that feeling again. I think that's why a lot of people, are calling for Poch to come back. But football, we've got to remember, that's like 10 years ago now. Football has moved on massively in this decade. There's a lot more games going on. Even when we were performing at our best, we had probably the best we had in Harry Kane, Son. The players that are disposable in that first 11 were fantastic. I think the problem we had under Poch was we didn't really give him good enough rotation options and backups. I'm pretty sure our best, I would need to double check this, but I'm pretty sure our best tally total score for Poch wouldn't be anywhere near enough to win the league over the last 5 years. So and obviously we might be better, but this notion that him bringing it back in means that we're going to be competing for the league again, which is what I think some people have in their heads. I just don't see that being true. It's well reported as well. I think also Spurs had that podcast the other day with the coach, the fitness coach that was under Poch, and who else was it? I think it was Poch. He worked with Ange at Celtic. He said himself that actually Pochettino's trainings are far more intense than what something like Ange does as well. And I think we all remember that from his time at Spurs now. And there's a lot more games going on every season. You've got winter tournaments happening with rumours of there being another one in the future.
Yep.
So I think the chance of getting more injuries in this case is massively high. So there's so many factors where I just don't see how bringing Poch back now is even a consideration. I think the biggest of all, anyway, Brian already touched on, he's not going to give up on the USA after just joining 4 months ago with the host nation next year. It's just not going to happen.
How convinced are you, George, that Ange Postecoglou will still be the Spurs manager coming into the season right now?
Not totally convinced. Obviously, like I said, I would like us to see out the season with him and then just reassess. But I think, like I said earlier, I think a lot of what happens with Ange now totally rests on how we do in the Europa League, because for us as fans, it's a European trophy. It would be incredible. For the club, it's the only route we have now back into the Champions League, which is ultimately what they want.
Yep.
So I think pretty much his tenure at Spurs now solely rests on what we do in Europa League. And just the way things are going right now and with the football, I don't know if we can make it all the way and do it. I would love us to. I'd love nothing more than us to. I think the only thing, like I said beforehand, that plays into our favour is that European teams haven't really sussed us out. We've played our second team for most of the tournament, and we lost to Galatasaray Okay, we drew to Rangers, but again, away is tough. We've done okay in the competition so far. With the first team back and some players come back, we can do better, especially as the games become more important. I think the problem is, though, even with players coming back this week and next week, the players that have played the last month or 2 months back to back to back, they're knackered now and susceptible to injuries. So now we've got to give them enough rest and play the players that are coming back. There's so many things to juggle. I just don't see us as performing in the Europa League as well as I would want us to. And ultimately, I think if we get knocked out, that is Ange gone.
What's the gut you take? What's your gut, Bob? I know, like I say, if it was you, you'd be driving up down the US and bringing Maurizio back here and chaining him and making him come back to the football club. But with all due respect, where we are right now on Ange for you, do you think he will be at the end of the season? Can you see Spurs getting Daniel Levy getting an itchy finger before that? If results don't go to plan once these players come back from injury, what do you feel at the moment?
Yeah, look, it proves the hope that kills you with football. Like, I still think we can win the Europa League. If you look at the other teams in it, I think we, like, with no teams coming down from the Champions League, I think we can certainly give it a good go. Like, who else is there? United, Galatasaray, Sociedad. There's not that much in there, really.
Oh.
Like, do you know, like, if ever there was a chance to win it, it is this season, even where we are. And especially when we have our first 11, first 14 players are good enough to beat anyone, like absolutely anyone. But yeah, if we go out of the Europa League, he's gone. I think it's as simple as that.
But is out of interest, Bob, the purpose of one, if we do crash out the Europa League and he goes, is that because we've just crashed out of that final cup competition, or do you think we'll get any more of a bounce for the latter part of the season? I just feel in my mind now that, as George said, there's been probably a number of occasions this season where you felt they could have made the change earlier, and because they haven't got a viable option out there, I just feel like we're in a situation now where I think they probably will just stick with him to the end of the season and reassess. You feel for you, if we were to crash out the Europa League, you think they would just pull the trigger after that? You think?
I think he's gone, and I think we said it. We were talking about Levy earlier. Like, he's consistently done the same things. He's always pulled the trigger at this stage in the season if it's gone badly. So yeah, I can't see him staying if we go out. But simple as that. What's
your gut say for you, Brian? I mean, look, you've made it clear. If it was you personally, you'd make the change now, and you would maybe have to deploy Mason and Wells in for the remainder of the season. What do you think the club are going to do?
I think it is they're going to wait for the Europa League. But where I am with the Europa League, if they do that, we're talking about these players coming back fit and ready. These players coming back. do you start bringing them back immediately, or do you wrap them in cotton wool and roll them out for the Europa League games? None the latter.
He's been telling us, though, just to come back on that point, he's been telling us that the players maybe could have come back earlier and he's been resting them because he didn't want to throw them in. That's what he's been suggesting.
Right, he tried that with Richarlison, didn't he? Although it's not a good example, he gets injured quite easily. But we've heard it a couple of times that we gave him an extra 2 weeks to get there.
Yep.
And it's not worked. I don't know if literally, I mean, we've got United, Ipswich, and there's another game before we potentially play, and an international break before Europa. I think there you go. I think you keep them wrapped up and maybe give them the odd minutes here and there and just train them and keep them fit. Maybe games behind closed doors to get them fit, because the whole season does ride on it now, doesn't it? I don't think we're going to. No matter what happens, if these players come back, we're not getting into the top 7. Not a chance. So the only way to viably get Europe this season, or for next season, is to go out and win the Europa League. And for me, that's keeping all the star players fit and ready and hungry for the Europa League games.
It's, I mean, I have to go back to you, George, because I know, again, like you are willing to go give it more time with Ange. I just wonder, can you see a world in which he actually turns this around and still has a big future at Tottenham? Because what I think about is, when there's this amount of noise under a manager, the only person I can think of that has got through this amount of noise is probably that man down the road. I don't know anybody that's got this amount of noise around them and come through out the other side. Do you feel in your mind that we are going to see an uplift when those players come back? I'm really intrigued to know that, because there'll be many fans that, I think I said it earlier actually on Tottenham TV, that when he got the players back in the second half of last season, we didn't really see much of an uplift.
Yep.
Do you feel, G, for you, that if he does get those players back, you can see a world in which we do go on to win the Europa League, and then suddenly there is a real big, long future under Ange? Because I think, don't get me wrong, it'd be incredible to win the Europa League. It'd be incredible to win the Europa League. It'd be our most successful season in the last 17, 18 years. And I think on that point, you couldn't sack Ange Postecoglou if he won the Europa League. You just couldn't.
Oh, definitely
So you'd have to give him the next season. But I still feel going into that next season, if you guys remember under Ramos, even when he won the Carabao Cup, there was still that massive pressure. If you were going into that next season as to whether how long can this guy be here, because the league form was awful. So, I mean, I'm at a point now where, like I've said this so many times on here, I think the constraints put on a manager with ENIC means that nobody can be successful here. I think we've come to a point now where really whoever we appoint, I think even Guardiola, if it was Klopp, if it was Ancelotti, I think they would find it hard to win here. The same way Mourinho and Conte found it hard to win here, because we go and buy the win, we go and bring the win now managers in. We don't give them the win now players. So I just feel we've come to this point of exhaustion where every fan kind of is at a point where they're thinking, who would work here anymore? Who would be able to work on these conditions?
To that point quickly as well, I think we've got to remember so when we had one day run and we won the cup, I think we finished 11th that season.
Yep.
I believe the League Cup in 99, we finished 9th, if I'm not mistaken. Pochettino getting to the Champions League final. We were horrendous in the league from January onwards.
Didn't win the away game. Didn't win the away game, did we? For nearly over a year.
Exactly. Yep. So I think the problem is the constraints that the board have put on any of the managers that we've had previously means that we have to choose what we want to be. Do we want to be a team that's competing in the league, or do we want a team that competes in the cups? Because we do not and have never had the squad to compete in all four like a Man City can. It's not something that we're able to do. And I think today shows that this season shows that as well, that we actually made it quite far in all four competitions, in like the 3 cup competitions compared to what we did last year. And you saw the players just falling like flies and struggling with it because we didn't really have adequate backups. We knew injuries were going to happen. We saw what happened last season. Every team in the league is getting injuries. It's not like you can avoid them completely. So I think with just the way that we're set up, we have to just choose what we want to be. Do we want to take the cup seriously? Do we want to compete in the league? I don't think we're able to do all of them. Earlier to your point about whether he can turn around it completely, look, it's definitely possible. I think it relies on too many factors working in our hands, like the players coming back and just staying fit. I think that's really important. Which is obviously a big ask, because if someone's come back fit, someone else is going to go out injured realistically. So I don't think that's possible. But again, like you said, I think the parallels between, as much as we probably don't want to admit it, the parallels between Arsenal and Spurs are so insane. Look, they moved to a new stadium. They couldn't buy players for a long time. They really struggled towards the end of Wenger's time because of that not being able to compete. And they were complaining about only getting top 4 and winning the Cup and not challenging for the league. Arteta comes in. He has older, more experienced players, which you would argue are still good players, Lacazette, Aubameyang, Ozil, but he wanted rid of them because he wanted to play his way and have his style and implement it in the cross. And unfortunately, especially for a younger manager like him, you can't get that across as easily in more experienced players who have done it all. You do it with the youth, and that's what they did. You had Emil Smith-Rowe, you had Saka come through, you had Nketiah play off, and like Arsenal's team was young. And they did terribly the first 3 years. 8th, lost out to Champions League for us, 5th. But they stuck by him and they stuck by his principles, and they were able to turn around. Like, look, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen with Ange. I'm saying it's just a possibility. It's a possibility for us to do that. But I think that relies on players staying fit. We also need to bring in more experienced players in the summer to allow that to happen. Because as well as Bergvall and Gray have been when playing a lot, which has been fantastic, they're so young that there's going to be inconsistencies about their game. And you're just not going to compete in the league or cups with players that are going to be inconsistent. They will grow well and they'll continue to develop well, but it's going to take a while to see the fruits of that labor. So I think if Ange was to succeed with Spurs going forward, I think we'd have to have a really successful Europa campaign. Players would have to stay fit and would need to give him more experienced players like Solanke is. A lot of factors to consider. So, look, I said, it is possible. It's just whether they're willing to do it or not.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, Bob, like George has said there, that there has to be a lot of factors at work in Ange Postecoglou's favour that would be able to get Tottenham to a point where they could go on to have a really good, second half of the season. We're already in February now. I mean, look, we've got a job now to really stop finishing in what would be, I think, our worst league pace in what would be nearly over 12, 13, 14 years. We're not used to the position we find ourselves in now. I mean, Bob, realistically, in your mind, once we get those players back, and again, I think George makes a really important point there, it's not just about getting the players back, it's also about keeping those players fit and them not breaking down again. Do you see in a world in your mind, Bob, where you actually see some gradual consistency with Tottenham in these next few weeks? We'll come on to those players that are coming back. Can you see that in your mind happening? Can you see this change happening?
When those players come back?
Yep.
Yeah, look, as George said, it's about keeping them fit. It's about not just getting them back in the team, it's keeping them fit when we get them back in. And just to caveat the point I previously made about the Europa League, that's on the basis of us being fully fit. We wouldn't get absolutely near it at the moment, and I'm not stupid enough to think we would. But look, who knows what players are going to get injured, what players are going to stay fit, Grant. But and based on kind of what happened last season, Maddison came back in. He hardly kicked. When he came back in, he didn't get near the levels he was for the first 10 games either.
Yep.
So, yeah, if we can get players back to stay fit, I think we can get a bit of consistency in our performance. Absolutely, I do think that. But if we stay where we are at the moment, and if we do have players coming in and then another player fall in, and not getting that consistency, we're going to kind of stay in the stage we're at the moment, where we have maybe one big win and then we don't win for a few weeks, and then we have another win. We're just too inconsistent. And I can't see us finishing any higher than 13th, 14th, where we are at the moment. If we get our players back in, yeah, I think we can start to make our way back up the league. Not to any sort of respectability, but towards bottom half, top half. I can see us kind of finishing towards the end of the season if we can keep people fit.
Well, listen, we will see that. I'm very conscious of time, guys. We're going to quickly squeeze in where we are on Christian Romero. Before I do, I need to come over to Brian, because ahead of this weekend, the Manchester United game, we know, just to bring some, again, advertisement to this. I must say, guys, over nearly 6,000 of you that are watching the show live, please hit like and subscribe. Please share this out to a worldwide Spurs range audience. Brian, I want to bring you in. I think for many out there, this is a really important weekend where we want to try and emphasize how big what a lot of Spurs fans are trying to come together to really point out there is the fact that there is going to be a protest ahead of this coming Sunday, the 16th of February, ahead of that Manchester United game. It's going to be at 2:45. Change for Tottenham. We're going to be sending out more details to come ahead of the game. Look, I think this is a call from us here to all the listeners and viewers of Last Word on Spurs, to our worldwide international fans out there, to really come together to support this protest, and also in general support the football club. We're coming to a point now, which I've said before is a really important moment in the history of Tottenham. We've seen us crush out of 2 cup competitions in the space of the last week. And for many out there, it's actually not just about Ange Postecoglou, tactics, injuries. It's the culture that has changed around the football club, that there's an acceptance, it feels, that when we get to that stage of these competitions, maybe we don't believe we should be there. Tottenham Hotspur, for me growing up as a kid, were a cup team. My dad introduced me to Tottenham as a cup team. We were a side that in the 80s, the 90s, that would get into cup finals and we were winning them. We've come as a football club now, Brian, that almost, as we can see, for want of a better word, we're shitting ourselves in the final stages of semi-finals.
Yep.
Getting to a finals have been, few and far between in the last few years, bar the Champions League final. How important do you think, in your mind, Brian, is this protest ahead of the weekend to really, I would say, get Spurs fans of all kinds coming together, those that have been very moderate over the last few years, that have become accustomed now to feeling they're losing the soul of this football club, right?
So first of all, what I will say is, excuse me, change for Spurs and Jay, what they have done has been absolutely outstanding. And I do mean outstanding. As you know, Ricky, and as you've said, myself and many others have been trying to get some movement on this and feeling this way about our ownership for a long, long time. And we couldn't get the numbers and there wasn't enough interest. But now there is. Like you were saying, Ricky, you and I are of a similar age. And when I was growing up being told about Tottenham and what we were and what we used to be, stuff like the game is about glory and to dare is to do actually meant something about this football club. It actually embodied what we did. I'm not saying that we used to be the most successful team in the world, but we always used to compete. We always used to try. We had that to dare to do his attitude. And even in the 90s, when we weren't as good, we weren't good at all, but we had the players like your Gascoignes, your Klinsmans. The big players came and we still had these great moments, these great memories. And since we've moved to this stadium, and before that with Daniel Levy and ENIC, it's been clear to see as time goes by that football is not a priority. It's an inconvenience. It is a stepping stone for bigger things and other things that can give them bigger commercial growth, bigger reach, bigger sponsors. And we are a football club, first and foremost. And as I've said, and as you've mentioned, people will know I've been like this since Martin Jol was sacked, October the 26th, 2007. Other people have been other times, whether it be Pochettino without getting money, whether it be the Super League, whatever Conte getting sacked, Mourinho before a final, or now where we are now, where, again, I'll revert back to what you said when we left White Hart Lane and when you left your seat, we were challenging for titles and in the Champions League, and here we are in the lower half of the league where we shouldn't be. No Tottenham team at this stage of the season should be there.
No.
Not saying we should be challenging for top four or title all the time. Shouldn't be here. And if I said to every Spurs fan, with the team we've got, without the injuries, where should this Tottenham Hotspur be around this time of the season? I don't think anyone would have said 16th, 14th. It's unacceptable. And we've got to the point now where, thankfully, after what changed for Spurs and Jay did at the Leicester game, where it all went very, very quiet and then bang, it was in your face. It's got people talking. It was been discussed. Even yourself, Ricky, I've watched that stream that you did after that Leicester game with you fuming, crackers going mad, and it was a turning point for many, many people. And loads of people like myself that have been doing this have tried to win little battles to try and get more awareness, to try and have an impact on what this ownership do. And the numbers just weren't there. And to win the battles, we've had to try to win the battles, and we've always said we need numbers to win the war. And thankfully, the breaking point for a lot of people has come at this very moment where we are now, whether it be because of lack of spending, whether it be lack of management getting the chance, whether it be these injuries, whether it be the concerts, wherever it may be, the PSR that we can now, whatever it may be, the numbers are coming. People have actually seen it, and it's brilliant to see so many people embracing this and saying welcome aboard. And that's what it is. We cannot do this fragmented or arguing with each other. This is, as Change for Spurs have used all the time, our club, our voice, and that's what it is. And we want to try and get our club back in the direction where, as I started, to dare is to do, and the game is about glory, actually means something again.
I think, Brian, you hit a lot of nails on the head there. I think the really key thing I would say out there is that I think for many out there, look, this doesn't restrict anybody out there, whether you go every week, whether you don't go every week, whether you actually are planning on going to the game, that you can still go to the process and not go to the game if that is what you choose to want to do so. I think it's really important that we make that point. I think I said this on the eve of the Leicester game, that I think for many out there that go to Spurs with families, the reality is that I think this will be a protest where there'll be so many different people from variations of, grandfathers, fathers, mothers, grandmothers, children, women, men. This doesn't restrict anybody. I think it's really important. I've said it so many times that we come together and we try and get our football club back to what Brian says is that those mottos of to dare is to do, because with all due respect, there's not been much daring. There's not been much doing. So we need to, I think, get to a point where we recognise what we are again, because I think we are losing ourselves drastically as a football club, and we are seemingly existing. I've said this point, Newcastle fans felt like they were just in a hamster under Mike Ashley with no real get out, and they were stuck in a cycle. And look, Newcastle haven't won anything yet, but they have got to, I think, 2 finals in the last 3 years. under their current ownership. Yes, they've got some issues around PSR, but the reality is that, you know what, you can never guarantee with change it's going to be better. But to want to stay where we are right now and what we've seen in the last 24, 25 years, all I can say for me as a fan, that I think for the amount of Spurs fans that stop me in the street and tell me how much they love the show, I know for them fans, they want so much more. And I would just implore every single Tottenham fan out there that want to feel that this club is actually fighting, trying to get back to where we belong. I would implore everybody to go along to that protest. And I think, again, the message has been, look, it's a peaceful protest. It's one where we want to come together. We want to vent our frustrations in a non-violent, non-physical way, but in a way in which we're going to be recognised as a fan base that simply do want more. And my message would be, because I will be there at the weekend ahead of that Man United game for the protest, my message would be that this can't just afford to be just a one-off. I think there has to be consistency in terms of that protesting. So there is an element of that. People know we're going to keep going. And until we get that change, we are going to be there. And I think there is enough Spurs fans out there that are so frustrated by where they see the current plight of the football club. And it isn't all just about being 14th as well. It's not just about this season. Go back and look at where we have now become, where we have let our standards go. I think that's the key thing. It is about standards. I think for a lot of us out there, we've lost our standards as to what we are as a football club. And I would implore every fan out there to get behind the Tottenham that you know and love, the Tottenham that left White Hart Lane, as I said, when you was in your seat at White Hart Lane, that were in a title race. And here we are right now, really floating aimlessly without any sense of direction. Talk about direction, talk about where we are right now. I have to ask very quickly about Christian Romero, Bob, coming over to you. We've seen reports that apparently, and this could be just, again, PR coming through, that they're trying to see if they can negotiate with Christian Romero over a new deal. Look, Romero has gone public with regards to his frustration at maybe not seeing adequate money being spent to improve the playing squad in comparison to maybe other clubs that are looking to compete for honours. In your mind, Bob, you know, again, the reality is we saw Romero back in training a couple of weeks ago. We haven't seen him since. I mean, number one, do you know where he is? And number two, can you see Romero signing a new deal given where we are right now as a football club?
I can't see him signing. In saying that, we have the money. We also, the Deloitte report there a couple of weeks ago, 42% of our turnover revenue has been spent on wages in comparison to, you know, what our rivals are spending. We're way off it. So the money's definitely there. We have the money to offer him. Do I think we should? Yeah, I think we should absolutely throw money at him. I think he's our best centre half as a defender, fully fit, obviously, when he wants to play. And alongside Van de Ven, I think it's a perfectly balanced centre half pairing. Yeah, like I think we should be absolutely throwing money at him. I think a huge reason on this is where we are as a club right now. If he was to leave, are we going to replace him with a player of his standard? Or are we going to be bringing some young player through and then trying to cross our fingers that he comes through and plays, can get to the level of Romero?
Yep.
Romero's ready-made. Like, obviously, we know he's ready-made. He's been playing for us for the last 4 seasons. Yeah, I think it's an absolute no-brainer to offer him that contract, pay him what he wants, break the wage structure if you have to. And not just with him, just a few other players there. We should be doing the same with Kulusevski for one, maybe Van de Ven. I'm not sure. But yeah, absolutely. We need to be throwing the money at him.
Yeah. Listen, on that point, I mean, G, with regards to Romero, do you see a world in where he does extend, given that he's been fairly critical publicly of the board? I mean, like Brian said earlier, he's not the first one. We've seen Sonny, to some degree, also seem to indicate that similar feeling, as well as Dejan Kulusevski as well, given it was so public about Romero and the fact that at the time Ange felt he may have had to apologise. I mean, what's your gut feeling on it for you, George? Can you see Romero being here past the summer?
My gut feeling says no. Obviously, like the optimist in me would love him to. I'd want him to. I think he's so important for us and criminally underrated by a lot of our fans. Just his ability to pass the ball out the back alone is brilliant. You know, World Cup winner, 2 times Copa America player. You don't just, these players don't come around very often. And arguably, it's the first time we've spotted him before other clubs have, when he wasn't as known Atalanta. So I'd love him to. The reason I just can't see it happening again is the track record and the wage bill versus other clubs. When it comes to the summer, he'll have 2 years left on his deal. He's 26 years old right now, so he's just about to enter his sort of prime years, early for a centre back as well. Look, Real Madrid need a centre back. They need two centre backs, to be honest with you, and I can almost guarantee you they're going to come sniffing for him in the summer. And realistically, if you look at the state that our club's in now, versus the fact that he could leave at 26 and go play for Real Madrid, would try and win Champions leagues. There's just no way he's going to pass up the opportunity. And I think signing a deal stops that from happening. And I think before, and I had this with Harry Kane as well, right? Before I'm like, no, he's definitely going to sign a new deal. He loves the club to bits. We just need to convince the board to, do more. And like Kane said himself, we need to prove that we're going on the right track.
Yep.
We didn't do that. Kane ran down his contract. He wasn't signing a new deal, so the club had to sell him. And we're talking about Romero, who isn't going to be anywhere near as in love with Spurs as Harry Kane was. So there's just no way that I see Romero signing another deal unless there were clear signs that we're pushing on. That is winning Europa League, making decent signings in the summer. And I don't think any of us here can speak confidently that that's necessarily going to happen. So yeah, I don't see him signing a deal.
What's your gut feeling view on it, Brian? I mean, as a player that I think he does love the club, although I'm not sure he loves as much as Argentina. If you look at his form for turnout for them than he does for us, but I mean, for his own sake of his career, like George said, he's entering his best years right now. I think he doesn't want to give him to this ownership rather than give him to the fans. I think he loves the fans. I'm not sure he's keen on the ownership, to be honest with you, more than anything else. Like a lot of the probably players at the moment.
Ricky, I think exactly where I am. Exactly what George said as well. You look at what happened with Kane and other big players. It's clear he does love the club, Romero. He does. He's spoken about it on numerous occasions. But again, these big players want to know they're at least challenging for the major honours, or definitely within a really good shot of getting them. And unfortunately, it's not going to happen at Spurs. It's very, very good PR to say this is what we're trying to do. And I think this is a classic Levy 101. Let's try to appease the fans by saying we're doing this when we're not. But if you look at Romero, what I will say, the first season he came, he was fantastic, absolutely out of this world. Second season, hit and miss. Last season was great. And this season, he's gone back to being hit and miss when he has played. In a Spurs shirt, I think Spurs are going to cash in on him. The big question comes, again, like George said, is do Spurs reinvest that money to bring in a quality defender to replace him, or is Dragusin that replacement, or do they take a percentage of the Romero money and spend it on a defender, hoping they come good, or again say Ashley Phillips, Vuskovic, here you go, here's your chance, away you go. I think Romero is going to be gone. I think on his day, he is world class. On his day, he is brilliant.
Yep.
Especially, again, like George said, playing out from the back, his aggression are brilliant things that he brings to Tottenham. But now, how reliable is he to stay fit? He's had injury issues every season, I believe. And I think once these big Spanish clubs come, any team, any player from any club, but especially South Americans, their heart's there. I think we're this is the last season of Romero. I can't see him signing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, gut feeling for me is that I can't see him staying. And I think he does like Ange a lot. I mean, whether he likes him more as a man than tactically or whatever is a different question. But I think he does like Ange Postecoglou. It's going to be interesting how that does pan out, because to be fair to Tottenham in general, they haven't really sold a lot of the players that they've wanted to keep. And when I say that, obviously Harry Kane went, but when you think about it, before him, you probably say Kyle Walker has been the only other one they've actually let go and they've really wanted to keep him. So that's a dangerous precedent as well. Once you let Romero go, you're also looking at players like just Kulusevski think I've got to get away. Solanke as well down the line. I mean, it's quite dangerous.
This is the thing. It's a bit of a knock-on effect, because we all know from previous things that the club are going to demand a crazy fee for him. He's still got 2 years getting towards the end of it, but still with 2 years, look at what Crystal Palace were demanding for Guehi. And I would argue that definitely Romero is above that level.
I just think Romero's the kind of player, George. I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm not saying he would do this, but I think he's the kind of player that he would do what he needs to get the move. Does that make sense?
No, 100%. But that's kind of what I'm alluding to anyway, is that like
Yeah.
we will demand an insane fee because we're just not going to let him go on a cheap.
Yep.
But that means he will most likely down tools because he's like, well, I want to get out of here. So then next season is going to be a bit of a problem with him as well. So there seems to be not an easy, good solution in this scenario.
It's a tricky one. We will wait and see on that. We will wait and see. Do you want to say something like that, Bob? That point
Yeah,
with
can I just
Romero?
hop in there? Just
Please.
on not just Romero, and this ties back to kind of as well what we were saying earlier. If it was a case that, let's say, we part ways with Ange and you put Matt Wells and Mason until the end of the season,
Yep.
do we have a better chance in keeping players like Romero, Kulusevski, our crown jewels at the moment from what we have left? Should Ange stay to the end of the season, or Ryan Mason or Matt Wells are in charge? And the reason I'm asking that is we all know what players are like with their agents. We all know they get in their ears when they're not happy. If I'm Kulusevski, and I know I'm flip-flopping on the Ange thing, as I said I am, if I'm Kulusevski, come the end, Matt Wells comes in and Mason to replace Ange next month, just for example purposes, I'm getting in my agent's ear. I'm saying here, sort this. The club's a mess, playing under these interim bosses who haven't done anything. They're not big names. Blah 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 blah. I think we're more likely to lose players should we get rid of Ange and bring in Mason and Wells in comparison to staying with Ange.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I also wonder as well on that point you're saying there, Bob, to maybe again play devil's advocate. How many players are really enjoying it at the moment? I look at the way in which some of the body language is out there, and don't get me wrong. I think George has said during the show there's a few players that have are enjoying playing for him, but I've always also maybe thought to myself, and this again goes back to that point: would somebody get more out of these players? And the reality is, I think whether we were to bring in somebody in the summer or whether we were to make a change now, I just don't personally feel I don't think it makes a massive difference in terms of whether it's the agents getting in there now or whether it's in the summer, because nothing can really be done in the next few months. But I do take your point there. Look, I think going back to Romero, it sounds like he has got a relationship there with Ange Postecoglou, because he obviously did retweet a thing a number of months ago where he suggested that he was fully behind Ange, and if he was to be let go, then that maybe change his view. I think it's it's hard to insinuate. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but the reality is that there's probably some that still love Ange Postecoglou. There's some that maybe aren't massively fond of him. There's some that I'm sure watch shows like this Last Word on Spurs, and they probably themselves question as to where they are right now.
Can I just quickly jump in on that, Rich? Super quick. I think for me personally, I don't really necessarily like the mentality of can another manager get better out of these players?
It's not right. It's not right.
When you're saying as well, to be honest, from the players that seem to be backing him a lot are the players that we would all say are probably our better players in the team. Romero, Kulusevski, Maddison, Solanke, Porro, they've all come out and said that they fully back him and his ideals, even when it's been really poor. The ones that maybe necessarily have quote unquote down tools, which we don't really know if they have or not, are the ones that we're calling out as being really inconsistent and not doing as well. So I don't necessarily like this mentality of, we need a manager that can do better from these players. I think it kind of comes back into the whole change for Tottenham sort of thing. Is even if the change isn't them leaving, we've got to strive to be better and say, all right, well then let's get in players that have a better winning mentality and want to play this way. You don't see Pep saying, I'm going to go defensive now because Kovacic doesn't like playing this ultra-attacking football because he gets caught out in midfield. Pep doesn't change his ideals for anyone.
No.
He brings in the players to play that football. Klopp didn't change his ideals for anyone. They had a similar sort of start, very similar. Obviously, he did better, obviously, but he had a similar start where they were trying to outscore the opponent. They were still conceding loads, but he wasn't saying, I'm going to make this gegenpress. You know what? Instead of that, let's go and sit back a little bit so we stop conceding goals. He decided to go get Alisson and Van Dijk for 75 million apiece because he realized that would fix the defense. So I think we need to kind of get this mentality of, a better manager needs to get more out of these crap. Well, they're not all crap, but this mentality of, they need to get better out of these players. Our mentality should be, board need to back the manager that they have said they're backing, put pen to paper or put the money where their mouth is and actually give them the tools to succeed with this football.
The problem is Brian will know, though, in the last 24, 25 years, when have they actually ever done that? I mean,
no, of course, but that's what I'm saying. You've got to keep the pressure on to either do that or another change.
I mean, does a leopard ever change its spots, Brian? So that's maybe to close and ask you that question, Brian, as George says there. There's got to be a change. Can you see a way in which Daniel Levy is going to, on Daniel Levy in the ball, going to wake up after the protest, which we hope, fingers crossed, please God, is going to go really, really well at the weekend. We're going to get really big numbers, we hope. There's going to be a real push and emphasis on change for Tottenham. What is the chance of Daniel Levy waking up on Monday morning thinking, God, I'm under real pressure here. I've got to change.
Yeah, I don't see that ever. I don't think we ever see a world where that happens, unfortunately. Listen, I had wanted, there's so many times when he's had the chance to play the hero. He's had these opportunities where we were Champions League and when we had that seat last season at the Lane, push on from there, just need a couple of players. You hear these big teams say we strengthen when we're at our strongest. This is when you go for it, and we refuse to do it. You look at deals like Jack Grealish and Dybala and all these deals that always fall through, and they're waiting for haggling all month to save £5 million, which in the grand scheme of things is nothing. Every single time he's had a chance to turn it around and be it, we go into every window, mainly the summer windows, where I get told this is the window where Levy puts his marker down. We're in this position now. This is the moment that we see Spurs attack the market and use the strength they have behind them, and then we sign a player early, and then the rest are just hassles and sagas and buzzwords and everything. And he's had too many opportunities to turn it round. As I always say, I don't trust Daniel Levy to give me the correct time, let alone invest and change his approach to Tottenham. So as much as I think, or people would want to think, oh, this is the time we do it, it's just not going to happen. I just can't believe it. Like you said, Ricky, leopards don't change its spots.
Look, I'm going to give everyone a chance to close. It's been a great, great show. I did say with free talkers we were trying to go for an hour. There was no chance we were going to get an hour. I'm so sorry, boys. I want to say a massive thank you to the wonderful George Achillea. George, thank you so much. And I think for many out there that still feel Ange Postecoglou is the right man, I think you give people credence as to why they feel he maybe should still be the right man. Again, look, I want to say on this show, there is no agendas. I think we all want what is best for the football club. And I think the problem is now, I look at the split amongst the viewers and listeners that watch this show so religiously. I don't think I've ever seen a split in my life right now as to where we are with regards to the manager. I think there's one unifying case right now, and it feels like everybody's on track with the fact something has got to change at the top. Because if it doesn't, we are not going to have a football club for too much longer in the way that we love our football club. G, thank you so much. We're going to see you back here real soon. How do you feel about Man United? Quickly, prediction for Man United? Dare I ask you?
Too early to say. I think the two teams that are in the mud and stink right now. His tactics aren't working. Our tactics aren't working. It's going to be one hell of a game. 7-5. No, okay, I don't know. It's a tough one. We're both in literally the exact same position in theory. And I think it's going to be a game where, look, we've beaten them 3 times this year already, or 2-3 times. Yeah, I think we can do it again. It's just hopefully that week's rest has done us the world of good. Hopefully we get some nice team news with some players coming back, even if it is for 45 minutes, just to see some fresh faces on the football pitch. I think at this point. But yeah, happy to always be back on. Thank you for inviting me. It's a very therapeutic go through all this. And yeah, I think sometimes doesn't always have to be one extreme or the other. I think we just got to give a balanced look at things.
Listen, we've got 3 great people on here that are great in how they love the football club and the way they feel about it, but they've got different feelings. And the reality is that if we can't get to a place where we can just have a chat and everyone's got different feelings, then what is the point? It'd be mad if we all felt the same. I think we all feel different ways about the club. And again, it makes that point. We've all got different levels of patience. You know, some people have still got patience when it comes to ENIC, believe it or not. Which I know it sounds crazy. Some people have. But the reality is that I think, you know, what a lot of people are feeling right now is that something's got to change at the football club. So, George, you're amazing. We love you very much. Bob, thank you so much for coming back. Oh, tougher gig than probably previously, Bob. Never an easy gig on here at the moment.
Never an easy one supporting Spurs. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Ricky. Really enjoyed it as always. And yeah, great to meet you, Brian. And thanks everyone.
Yourself, buddy.
Top man, you've been a superstar. Listen, George Achillea across the socials. Bob __ Spurs for those that are on X. Bob, thank you so much. And Brian, just a real final, I think, shout out for you. Firstly, thanks so much for making your debut. It's been a pleasure having you on this show. So much love for you all got us on this show. I say 6,000-7,000 watching. Keep liking, keep subscribing. Brian, final rallying cry maybe to why you feel fans that maybe are maybe sitting on the fence with regards to the protests, why you feel those should want to come along and really feel they could be an advocate of change here. What would you say to those people out there that are still maybe on edge as to whether they feel the protest is right for them?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it as well. What I will say, first of all, Ricky, thank you for having me on. It's been great to finally make an appearance on Last Word on Spurs and meet the two people below me as well. Obviously, see them on social media, but obviously never get to interact with. Yeah, listen, when it comes to the plans for Sunday, there are so many people that say, I've wanted to do something, let's try and do something. Well, it's all been laid on a plate. It's all been laid there for you. The work that's gone behind it, you imagine the work we do when we put our streams on, it's the research, whatever. They have had to do so much to get this opportunity. So Spurs fans of all ages, sex, race, everything can come together and unite if they feel this way. And the great thing they've done this time is obviously there's something for people outside the stadium. So if you're like me, and if I had been in London, I would be attending the march, but not going into the ground because I won't go in there because of Levy. But you've got the chance to march if you don't go to the game. A lot of people said, "Oh, I don't want to come because I can't get into the ground." Well, there's something on there for you. There's going to be stuff inside the stadium. There's going to be the planned sitting, and obviously, if you have felt that you wanted to get behind something where it's been well organized, well put out, the message is clear, it's getting the attention it deserves. Well, now is the time. There has never been a bigger time, whether you look at the league form, whether you look at the money we're generating and not spending on the football club, the league table you've just brought out, whatever it may be, there is a big march to try and get this football club to prioritise football again. And that's what we're all missing. This football club has lost touch with itself and has become a multi-purpose entertainment complex with an ever-growing property portfolio that has football as a side hustle, when football should always be first when it comes to N17 and Tottenham Hotspur. And if you have the chance to march, if you have the chance to sit in, grab this opportunity, because like you said, Ricky, they're not going anywhere. And who knows what the pressure can do, whether it gets the ownership to change, whether it gets Joe Lewis to finally say, right, that's it, whether it be the media expose it further. We can't go on, like you've said, with this being the norm, where prices for the fans go up, but the value of the football players, the wages and everything goes down. And we all want our Tottenham back. We all want a club that we can actually be proud of.
Yep.
Rather than bantered. I don't want to see ourselves every single week on Paddy Power or Domino's. We've become they should take naming rights, the amount of exposure they're giving us. But we all want our football club back and we have a chance to unite. So let's just hope everyone takes the opportunity to get there and do it.
Brian, thank you so much. I think very poignant, important words for many at the fan base anywhere. That message, we want our football club back. Listen, let's make this opportunity to work on doing that for sure. We hope to see, like I say, as many as you can. Get to Sunday, peaceful, as you make that point. It's a statement. It's trying to get behind the Tottenham that we all know and love and get them back to where we belong, where the standards are not allowed to slip as they have been. I want to say a massive thank you to the wonderful George Achillea, the brilliant Bob Dwyer, the superb Brian Dagul over from Tottenham on Tour. Give that a like and a hit. Give George a like and a hit. And make sure you give Bob also a follow. Look, we have been the Last Word on Spurs. We'll be back with you later in the week. As always, thanks so much for all the incredible support. Keep strong, keep the faith. It's time for a change. And as always, come on, you Spurs.